Welcome to the Marta podcast, a sacred space of reclamation, unraveling, and in the age where loneliness and isolation are at an all-time high, also a place of deep connection to each other as well as to ourselves. As I share the intimate journey of my own life, I hope to reflect your own so that you can live more deeply and freely from a place of full alignment and authenticity. Because that is what we're here to do, to continually discover ourselves in order to fully express our sacredness, wholeness, and radiance as women. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Marta podcast. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate that you're tuning in and listening. What I wanted to bring to you today, the conversation that's been on my heart lately, is on the topic of softness. I have to say, as a woman, I sometimes wonder, where has our tenderness and our gentleness and our compassion gone? And when I look at my own journey into the softer, more tender and vulnerable parts of who I am, who I was, who I've always been, there seems to have been this journey of, in order to make it, you have to toughen up. And I feel like that was a little bit beaten into my existence. Not literally beaten, but you know what I'm saying, conditioned into my being from really, really early days. And that is, living life from a space of survival. You have to toughen up. You have to develop a tougher skin. You have to be resilient. You have to be strong. You have to power through. And it is true that had served me in certain circumstances, in certain situations. But I think what happens to many of us, this is certainly what happened to me, is we forget that survival mode isn't supposed to be the default mode then for the rest of our lives. And of course, I say forget as if it was a conscious choice. I think it happens in a way that we're completely unaware of. And so we sort of step out into the world as this warrior woman. And we think this is what power looks like. This is what power feels like. And yes, it can be very powerful. And from that space, we then go and we conquer and we achieve and we strive. And I often talk about my own journey with the need to succeed, the need to prove, the need to strive. And although it has helped me to be quite successful in life, I have to say that is what takes me on a journey away from my tenderness, my heart, and my softness. And when I look at the state of the world, I just feel like that is the one thing that's missing, that feminine tenderness. I mean, we're so hard, we're so armored, and then we go out there in wearing these self-protective layers. I find that I struggle. I find that I struggle with that dynamic because some of these walls we've built up around our hearts are so thick and they're so heavy that for me, as a woman who chooses not to live with those walls and those self-protection layers, I have a really hard time connecting. I have a really hard time connecting to other women who come armored, who come introducing themselves by their stories of their accomplishments and their achievements. And I, at this season of my life, am looking for connections with a lot more depth and intimacy. And I feel like we've gotten so used to leading, introducing ourselves, coming into the outside world so much as that quote unquote powerful me, like, look what I've done, look what I've achieved, look at who I am, that we constantly lead with that. And to me, it's just a hard thing to get past, to get to the substance of who we are as women. And I know when I gather women together, one of the first things I ask them to do when we sit around in small circles, around a table, whatever, in a small group, and I ask them to introduce themselves. Tell me who you are without telling me what you do for a living or without talking about your children. It is a really hard thing for a lot of women to answer. And so I guess the thing I wanted to ask you today is, how in touch are you with that softer side of yourself? With that more feminine? And I use that term loosely because the feminine is not only soft and flowy and beautiful and open to receiving. The feminine is also this burning, deep, destructive fire, right? But for the purpose of this conversation, I just want to talk about our nurturing, tender sides. Now, I got curious about how this happened, and looking at my own past, looking at my upbringing, looking at my childhood. For me, the tender, soft, nurturing, kind of a safe and affectionate and warm, gentle kind of an environment was very much missing when I was a little kid, when I was a little girl, when I was a baby. And so, my life could have gone one of two ways when it comes to that. I could have just assumed this is how to be a woman, the warrior woman, survival, having grown up around women who were World War II survivors, who were very active against communism, speaking up against the government. They were activists, and they deeply and loudly share their truth with an activist's energy. So a fighter. I'm going to fight against this injustice. That is very much in my blood, in my lineage. Survivors, fighters. And what's missing from a woman who shows up in life like that is that nurturing, warm, softer tenderness. And so I could have, like the many women before me, the generations that came before me, also assume that warrior stance. And I did externally. But I think for me on the inside, there was a really deep absence, which confused me, of that nurturing, warm, loving, and safe presence. That feminine, when I think of like a warm presence of a grandmother, for example, a loving, soft grandmother. Now, I totally romanticize the idea of a grandmother because I will also tell you, I had no grandmother when I was born. So both my mom's mother and my father's mother were already passed when I was born. And so I probably do romanticize the idea of like the elder, wise woman sitting with me by the fire and explaining to me about the birds and the bees. That was not a thing in my life, but I could have very much just taken up the warrior stance and rejected the softer, tender, heart-led and nurturing part of what it is to be a woman because no one modeled it for me. But what happened in my life is I sort of, like I said, I assumed that role on the outside, feeling the lack of the other on the inside. And when I had my own children, when I fell in love, those were the two ways that part of me very much came back online and was very active. So that was always in there. And different circumstances, different people, pets, for example, allowed me to access that part of myself. But she never went away. And so as I studied my own life for evidence of like, why did we become so hard as women? Like Why is striving for success so masculine? Even the way we exercise and work out and the hard bodies, and they've stopped looking feminine to me. What we do to our faces, and it's almost like this dysmorphia of what it means to be a woman from the outside, the unrealistic beauty standards that are set for us by a culture very much driven by the male gaze. It's like, where's the softness, not just of our hearts, but also of our bodies? Like, I'm one of those women where I'm like, I don't want a six-pack abs. I want my soft, tender belly that has birthed children, that has lost a child, that has grown lives inside of her womb. Like, I want that feminine part of me to be accepted and loved as part of who I am. And so my exploration into my own journey with, my feminine softness really has been that it's always been present. I've had access points to it, but the world very much would prefer for me to be hard, controlled, manipulated almost, put together, solid, concise, to the point. And I can do that. I can perform that quite well. Some of it is natural, but living simply just out of that part of me, to me, is not fullness or completeness of who I am as a woman. It serves me. It serves me well when I need to get things done, when I'm running a meeting, when you have to do life. But lately, the conversation I'm having with women in my spaces, the women that I'm encountering, is that longing for a return, that longing for perhaps the nurturance that we didn't receive as little girls from our own mothers, that is now calling us back to be that safe, nurturing space for each other as women, as sisters, and also for ourselves. The inner critic, the ways we're constantly almost internalizing the patriarchy that exists in the world. Like, the world doesn't need to tell us to self-silence or self-monitor or diminish our light and lower our voices. We've gotten so good at doing that ourselves. We don't need external reminders anymore. And so there's a harshness to that as we're constantly morphing and manipulating who we are to become the acceptable, the lovable version. And so the invitation I most recently sent out to my women through a masterclass that I hosted called The Longing was that of taking the descent back down into the shadow parts of who we are that we have repressed for the sake of love and belonging, and reclaiming them. Reclaiming the parts that perhaps we were told are not lovable or aren't beautiful enough or aren't feminine or are too much or too loud. And sitting with ourselves, asking some key questions in terms of, when did we start self-monitoring, silencing, repressing? When were we told something was too much or not good enough? How early did that start in life? And reconnecting to those voices, those parts of ourselves. And not in order to fix or improve or heal anything, but simply to retrieve it and love it back to wholeness, to integrate it into who we are, the fullness of what it means to be a woman. In particular in this case, reconnecting to our tenderness. Because I think so many of us have become the multitaskers, the ones that get things done, the one that spend so much time planning, controlling, executing, that we miss the small, tender moments of affection, of love, of slow moments of beauty that we simply miss because we're constantly in a hurry. And so this beautiful 3-part journey into looking what had happened. What is the story of the feminine, the story of being a woman in this lifetime, during our time, in history before us, through the women that came before us, the lineages, our own family lines? What do we as women carry in the archetypes, in the subconscious, in the collective experience of being a woman, becoming aware of that? We took a look at the beliefs and the truths of what we were told in our own families of what it means to be a woman, the beliefs that we ourselves still hold and carry. And the point of that examination was sort of to look at, is this still true for me? Is this truth, this belief, is it serving me? Is it something I want to continue? Is this how I want to be a woman? Or am I being a woman following someone else's formula that was laid out for me before I even took my first step as a little girl? And so examining all that as evidence, our own internalized truths and beliefs, in order so that we can choose if that is something that we want to continue, a certain way of being a woman? Or is there a shift, an adjustment, a refinement, a change that needs to happen with us so that something that's been passed down to us through the women in our families doesn't get passed down to our daughters and the women that come after them? And so it's almost this beautiful sacred pause in this program called The Longing, to look at, how have I been being a woman? And what do I choose for myself going forward? And, we did this beautifully through entering into an old story, a folk tale of the Selkie Bride, which I just adore. If you don't know it, Google it. It's beautiful. And it looks at the skins that we wear, that we shed when we go from the wild woman self to the more domesticated wife, mother. Even you can apply it to your workspace, your career, and how it is so important to reclaim those old skins. And so anyway, through the story, we poked and awakened something old and sacred within each woman in this program. And in order to reconnect to the true and older parts of who we are as women, like I said, the soft and the tender for the purpose of this conversation, but what I encountered as I was taking myself through that journey, through journaling and sitting with feelings that were coming up and watching the patterns in my own life, I really tapped into something that I will talk about on the next episode, and that is rage and anger, which was something I was simply not allowed to express as a little girl. And if you think about it, boys, will be boys, that's encouraged. But for many of us as women, rage is simply not permitted. It's not permissible. But what I want to leave you with is just how tender, loving, safe, and nourishing simply this conversation has been for me and for the women in my spaces. Just the freedom to be able to talk about the parts of ourselves that we've left behind, lost connection to, purposely rejected and silenced for each of us a different reason, was so freeing. It was such a sacred conversation between women exploring their own shadows, their own depths, their own voices, and being able to ask questions and live the questions and allow for the answers to come from the body, reconnecting with the wisdom that sits in our womb, whether or not you're a mother, the sacredness of just placing your hand on your womb and allowing yourself to feel the answer to a question coming from that space, coming up from that space, versus the constant tendency these days to talk about, think about, and journal, which keeps us in our minds all the time. And so this sacred journey into our shadow parts, to reconnect parts of ourselves we've lost along the way. And then the beautiful thing to witness was the reconnection to our needs, our desires, our passions, our creativity, the loss of which very often happens so early on when we start cutting off parts of who we are, the ways we play, the ways we experience pleasure, the ways we experience joy. And if you think about it, this is why the numbness and the disconnection is so prevalent these days. It's literally we're losing touch with our own aliveness as women. We forget to sense and feel our lives. We perform them based on concepts and expectations and ideals that are planted in us before we're even born. And so it was such a conversation of reclamation, but also taking radical responsibility for who we are as women and who we are becoming as women individually and collectively, and holding it in a space, in a small group of, sisterhood, like the old days of sitting by the fire together, open-hearted, not in any way competing, judging, and comparing, is the way that I believe we will heal as women, and is the way we will tap back into our softness, tenderness, and compassion, and then be able to offer it to ourselves first, because I think the ways we talk to ourselves internally is sometimes very unkind. We can then offer that love to each other. And then I really think we are here at this time, for such a time as this, to then go ahead and offer to the world, not this hardness and harshness and proving that we can do it all, because I'm so over that. Like, I can do it all. I've done it. I don't need to prove to anyone that I'm just as capable as a man. Like, it's not a contest I need to win. I don't feel that I'm not as capable, but I do feel that as a woman, and this is perhaps not a popular opinion, I have a different role in the world than a man. Not from a space of I'm weaker, not from a space of stereotypes, but from the space of deeply tuning into the essence of what it means to be a woman. The power that we have, we are the ones that bring forth life in this world. Men just don't. And that doesn't make them weaker, it just makes them different. And so I'm all for equality, equal opportunity, equal pay, equal freedoms. But I'm not losing myself in that battle, because I believe I'm here to bring forth something completely different than my husband is. And the fact that we can support one another in our own individual journey as a man and a woman also means that we get to bring something very unique to the world together as a couple. And for me as a woman in midlife, a woman who just turned 50, is the return to my heart, my softness and tenderness. Because the world is chaotic, the world is hard, the world is fast, the world is not always safe. And God, the world is busy and in such a hurry. And to me, that's sad, because we miss, like I said, the beauty, the tender, loving moments with our people. And I refuse for that to be my normal. I use the term, I unsubscribe. I really disconnect from the main narrative, from the stories out there, what I'm supposed to do, how I should live, what I should say, how I should look. And I just pave my own path. I'm on my own journey. And it's authentic and it's true to who I am and what I desire to experience in this lifetime, which is love and becoming more of myself. It's really such an unbecoming first to then become, tapping into the truth of who I am, and then being that unique light in the world for other women in order to give them permission to find their own truth and their own beauty and their own, I say song to sing or painting to paint or story to tell. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful when we then gather together as women, seeing the uniqueness, the true beauty, each of us, not all the same and mediocre because we're trying to fit in, but all of us extraordinary in our authenticity and uniqueness. And anyway, I think one of the most important things to me in this season of my life is sort of to be that safe and nurturing and loving guide for other women who are feeling lost, confused, and disconnected. And I want to normalize it for you. If you feel like you really don't know what's going on, who you are, where are you going, what your purpose is. I hang out in that space quite a bit myself. And I think it's just a normal experience for someone who is human, but also knows and is connected with her own divinity. And the most spiritual thing in this life, I think, is to fully allow the human experience in, not transcending it, but feeling the times that it's beautiful and exciting and exhilarating, but also fully feeling the times where it's just hard and heavy and painful, like living our truth. Whatever the moment brings, whatever the day has in store. And so just some reflections as I come off holding space for women over this 3-day journey. If you're interested in the Masterclass, I will put a link in the show notes for you. It's a self-paced course that you can take at any time. And it comes with quite a few meditations that I use to connect to my heart and to live out of that space of connecting to really my divine feminine and all the faces that she likes to wear, all the aspects of who she is. So, a gentle invitation. And so you, beautiful one, just to tap into that tenderness and softness that is within you, while you live in a world that tells you to be that tough fighter and warrior, take life by the horns. That's all good and great, but not at the cost of your tender, soft, beautiful, and sensitive heart. Because that, sister, is where your true power lies, and the ways you are able to love in this world. God knows there's enough pain. Can we dare to show up and be the love, be the light? And that's what I would love for you to sit with and tap into. Love yourself first. And then be that source of nurture, guidance, tenderness, and safety for other women. Because I think many of us are lonely. And we can only heal when we come together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. I'm sending you all my love, and I hope that you have a gorgeous day. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you resonate with this message, or if you have a topic you'd like me to discuss in a future episode, I would love to hear about it. Send me a message on Instagram @Marta Hobbs. If you'd like to move more deeply in a community of like-minded, soul-led women, please join me in mine. It's called Come Closer. And if someone in your life would benefit from today's episode, I would love it if you send it along to them. Just click share in your podcast app and text it to a friend. Finally, I would be so grateful if you'd rate and review the Marta Hobbs podcast in your favorite podcast app. Your support will help this show find the women who need it. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm sending you all my love. Take care.